Hello everyone. I wanted to make this video to go over what annotations are, why we do them, and to look at some examples. Up on the screen, we're on week 1, and in assignment number 3, we have 2 folders. We're going to go over the material in the first folder. So you'll find the link to this video that you're watching right here, and then here we're going to take a look at this page. Alright, so why do we annotate? We annotate because we're growing our vocabulary. Okay, we don't know everything. And the more you go into academic work, the more you go into a specific trade, a specific career, you're going to have new technical, scientific vocabulary. And you're not going to know everything. And so it's important that when we meet a word that we don't know, we go and we look that up. And sometimes when we do that, we can find a synonym for that word, and then we can write that word into the margins to remind us, hey, we looked that word up, that's what it means. Annotation also helps with our concentration. So sometimes our minds wander, but when we have to actually mark our text and mark our work, it helps us to focus a little bit more. And then when we annotate, we highlight or we can underline the main ideas, and so it makes it quicker for us to review the text that we're looking at. And then it's also a conversation with ourselves and the author. Sometimes you actually hear the author's voice in your head as you're reading and going through this. And then your written responses on the text on the page is your words trying to understand and make sense of what the author is saying, along with your own personal comments. And then we also annotate to figure out the author's thought pattern. Textbooks are pretty straightforward. In order to get to point E, you have to go through A, B, C, and D. But when we look at essays and editorials, especially in like English 101, sometimes the authors aren't as straightforward. And so they might ask you a question, they might start with the opposite of what they're actually talking about, and so they can go on a different path. And so when we annotate, it helps us see the development of their ideas. And then when we annotate, it helps us to identify writing patterns, which is very closely related to number 5. But here we're talking about multiple paragraphs that relate together. So are there multiple paragraphs that are the introduction or an illustration? We can use this symbol here in the margins to help group like things together to help us understand what's going on. And then finally, annotations simply show us the progress we made in that text. So if you fall asleep while reading it, chances are that wherever you left off making your annotations, that's where you stopped reading. This next page here is the rubric that I would use to grade annotations by if we were in a face-to-face in-class setting. Okay, so if you had to write these things on a paper copy of your article, these are the things that I would look for. So 1, did you number each paragraph correctly? And that means making sure you know, literally putting a 1, 2, 3, 4 next to each paragraph. Number 2, did you box and define your vocabulary? So words that you didn't know, you put a box around, and then you wrote the definition in the margins. Did you underline or highlight the main ideas of each paragraph? Did you write a summary of that paragraph or group of paragraphs in the margin? And finally, did you put any of your own personal comments concerning the topic in the margins? Okay, so this is what I normally would grade if you turned in a paper copy, but since we don't have that, the annotation worksheet that's in the other folder that you'll complete for this week's article is asking similar questions. It's it's going to do the same to show that you've actually worked with the text. So let's take a look at what a paper copy of annotations would look like, and this is what my copy of the article you'll be reading this week looks like. Okay, so numbering the paragraphs in the margins, and then here you can see all of my summaries, things I've underlined, main ideas, and any personal comments. Okay, That's the first page. Here's the second page. So here they were trying to make 3 points, 3 and good points. So here I said point number 1 keeps you awake. Point number 2 is active reading. Point number 3, writing helps you to remember. Okay, so remember the idea with annotations is that you read the article, you make your notes, and then the next day before class, when you have to actually talk about the article, you don't have to go back and read the article again. Read your notes. And then finally, here's the third page of the article. Here's one of these squiggly line things. So I've grouped all of these bulleted points and I gave it like a heading, a topic. So ways to mark a book. Okay, and those are all in bold. Okay, so that's what it means when we annotate. We take the text and we're pulling the meat, we're pulling the important parts from it, and we're also replying to it. And I've seen some very interesting and really nice and neat annotations from students. Sometimes students will put only summaries of each paragraph over here, and then any personal comments they put over here. Feel free to use the space in between your paragraphs, the space up here, the space down here. That's what this article is literally talking about, is why should we mark up our books? Why should we mark up our articles? What can we do, and why is it useful? Okay, so that's just a general explanation of what annotations are and what we do. And now what you need to do is go into the next folder. This is the article that you'll need, so this is the copy of the article. It's an older article, so you might not know all the words in it, the references. So I have created a reference sheet here for you. So you can use this to help you understand some of the things in the article. And then also, besides these kind of people, places, and things that you might not know, there's some other general words that you might not know that you should know. And so here's a vocabulary worksheet that if you have Microsoft Word, download it and you can type in the definitions, or you can type them up on a different sheet of paper and submit that to the Dropbox. That's fine. If you don't have a dictionary at home, I have a link on this page that will tell you, send you to an online dictionary that you can use. And then finally, here is the annotation worksheet that you'll use for this. And so again, it's going to be a little bit different than what I previously showed you earlier. So instead of saying, did you number your paragraphs correctly, I'm asking you how many paragraphs are there. If there were any other words besides those not on the vocabulary worksheet and the reference sheet that you had to look up, list those right here. And then instead of looking to see if you underlined the main idea in each paragraph, I'm just going to ask you questions about certain paragraphs. So in paragraph number 15, it says list 3 ways the author suggests how you can mark up your book. So you're going to list 3 of those. Okay, so it's about making sure you understood what that paragraph was about. And then finally, what I would suggest here is I still want you to make the margin notes where it's a summary for each paragraph with personal comments. So what you can do for that then is you'll make sure that you have the article up on your screen, and then make sure you have a Word document or some other document if you're going to handwrite it, anything like that first. Okay? Oh, that's not what I wanted. Okay? And so here you'll go through and say paragraph number 1 and summary. Okay? You're going to write a 1-sentence summary of paragraph number 1. Okay? And then you're going to put a response. Okay? What do you think about what the author said? So let's take a look at this one. It says, you have to read between the lines to get the most out of anything. I want to persuade you to do something equally important in the course of your reading. I want to persuade you to write between the lines. Unless you do, you are not likely to do the most efficient kind of reading. Okay? So if you looked at this and you had to underline one sentence, that's the main idea, ask yourself which one it would be. Okay? So what he's saying is, I want to persuade you to write between the lines. Okay, so if you wanted to, for the summary part, you could either write down that main idea or put it into your own words. Okay, and then a personal comment. Okay, so looking back at this, writing between the lines, unless you do, you won't completely understand reading. The idea of writing between the lines, literally writing on the page, is that something you've done before? Maybe you have. So I have written between the lines before. Maybe you haven't, so that's going to be the response you put. Okay? And then you go to paragraph number 2. Again, summary and response. So paragraph number 2. I contend quite bluntly that marking up a book is not an act of mutilation, but of love. You shouldn't mark up a book which isn't yours. So here, a summary in our own words. To mark up a book is to love it. Okay? Maybe your response is never thought of this before. Okay? And then go on to paragraph number 3. Again, summary, response. And the reason why we're typing this on another page is obviously you can't, I'm not giving you a paper copy of the article and you're writing in the margins and turning that in. So here you're doing it this way. Librarians or your friends who lend you books expect you to keep them clean, and you should. If you decide that I am right about the usefulness of marking books, you will have to buy them. Most of the world's great books are available today in reprint editions. So, buy books you want to mark in, and then I have done this before. Okay? Or maybe I never thought about doing that. Okay, so these notes that you come up with here, then that is what you will turn in at the end of your annotation worksheet. If you wanted to just copy and paste into that last page, you could. So down for number 7, when it says now it is time for you to include the notes you took while reading this article. So these are the notes that I'm referring to. So you took each paragraph, here's a quick summary, this was a summary sentence, and maybe a response to it. When looking at an article, I usually say at least a response, 1 or 2 responses on each page of the article. And this article is 4 pages. So I would expect at least 4 personal comments in your notes, if not more. Okay? So this is a more of a practice one for us to do. We'll get more into this with another article during the 3rd week of class along with our book. So I know this is new. It's a little different because we're online, but please take your time, read through it. If you want feedback, hey, send me, hey, this is what I've gotten so far. What do you think? Am I on the right track? I will be happy to answer any of your questions. All right, you guys have a great week, and I will talk to you later.